welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of Finding Your Stride. I'm Brandon Handy, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today, our episode is focused on technology in the classroom, and we have a special guest with us today. Our special guest is an expert in technology in the classroom. She's a former elementary classroom teacher and is currently an Instructional Technology Specialist in North Texas. And she is one of a handful of people selected to be an Apple Distinguished Educator. I think there's less than 2,500 Apple Distinguished Educators in the whole world, so we're really thankful to have her on our show. Welcome, Morgan Cave. Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing today?
I'm great. As well as somebody can be quarantined in their home.
Right? Oh, I know. It's a super challenging time for us to be doing these types of things. They can't meet in person, and we're having to operate remotely as educators. It's a new endeavor for a lot of people. So I kind of wanted to start by talking about kind of what sets this podcast apart from other podcasts. Before we get started. And one thing I wanted to point out that our podcast here is kind of dedicated to keys for growth and really drilling down on a specific one or two types of different keys that allow teachers or educators who watch this podcast, listen to this podcast, to come away with something they can actually work with. So whether it's something they can immediately go and implement in their classroom or something they can start to set a long-term goal and work towards, but something that they can take from this and move forward. So I'm like I said, I'm so glad you were able to join us today. You are my first podcast guest ever, so thank you.
It's a huge honor, and I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. So my first big question for you today, it's a tough one. What's one misconception that you think people have about technology in classrooms or even implementing technology in a classroom?
I think that the biggest one really is that technology is different from any other instructional tool, because it's not. It's just like anything else. So when you're talking about bringing in tools or apps or software, it's just like any other resource that you want to vet and really do your research on before you start using it. Classroom management, that's always a big one. Classroom management with devices is just like classroom management without. And good teaching is good teaching, whether that involves technology or not. So that's something that I come back to a lot in conversations when I'm coaching teachers, that think about what you were already doing and what you already know about best practices and good teaching, and technology doesn't change that. I do think it can highlight things that are not going well in your room will often be highlighted by technology coming in, but we should approach it just like any other practice or tool or strategy that we use.
Yeah, I can totally see how like those things that would be going not so well to begin with are highlighted by technology, especially like classroom management.
Yeah, that is a huge one. And that's a fear that a lot of people have coming into technology in general, is what does that management piece looks like? And so with my team, we do a lot of role playing and scenarios and trainings so that people can hopefully come to that conclusion that it's just your regular, strong, good classroom management. All of those things that work with students without devices are successful when students have devices as well.
So leading into that, you used to have your own classroom, and you're an elementary school teacher, and you've been into tons of classrooms at this point in time. When you walk into a classroom that is really successfully using technology as an instructional tool, tell us what that looks like.
Well, going back to that first question, I think you can immediately tell you have to have good classroom management. Because if you didn't have a handle on what your kids were doing and how your classroom was running before you introduced devices, then the devices aren't going to be successful coming in either. I think it looks like a very student-centered classroom. So student-driven instruction, student-driven activities, students working independently, collaboratively in groups. And then one thing that really sets successful rooms apart for me is seeing students take that technology to the next level. So actually creating things and building things and using media and other things that devices offer that they couldn't have done before. So there's a place for everything. There's certainly a place for maybe watching a reteaching video or completing a quick assessment because you can get that data immediately, or even maybe a quick skill-based practice. But what really drives technology for me is that you can do things that were not previously possible. And so that's what I'm looking for in a classroom that I think is successful in their implementation. Students, creating videos, recording audio, creating media, animations, those kinds of things that are unique to the device itself.
Yeah, that's really great. I think from a lot of people probably hearing you just now, they're probably really intimidated. They're probably like, "Oh my gosh, recording audio and making videos and doing all these things on technology." And I know for people who have not been using technology in the classroom, that's really stressful to even imagine, losing kind of that control. So, if you had to give people two keys to implementing technology in the classroom successfully, what would those two keys be, do you think?
The first one I think is that you really have to be and it sounds so cliche, but I truly mean this and believe it. You have to be a lifelong learner. So you have to know that things are constantly, and especially with technology, but in education all the time, things are constantly evolving and changing. And what we know about how kids learn or what we know about strategies and tools that work, that information changes all the time. And so we have to be lifelong learners and change with that information and be willing to grow and improve as we learn more. And so I think that that's a really, really important piece of being successful with technology, because as soon as you learn how something works, it's going to have an update, or there's going to be a new one, or the device changes, or there's a new OS, or something has changed. So you have to be a lifelong learner, and you can't be stagnant in where you are. You've got to be willing to, okay, I'm never going to be a finished product. I'm always going to have to keep learning and keep growing to stay current and to stay successful. And another one would be letting go of things always going well.
Mm.
And that can be hard. So, we're going to try, I have to be okay with trying something new, and that the first time you do anything, it's not going to go well. And that's with technology or with any other practice. The first time you do yoga, or the first time you go for a run, or the first time you cook something that's really hard, it's probably not going to be the most perfect, outcome that it could have been, because it's the first time you're doing it. And you have to embrace that with technology too. And I think that that's where a lot of people quit. They're a little bit intimidated. They try it, it didn't go well, and they think, well, I can't do this, and so I'm not going to do it again. But that happens to everybody. And so letting go of that and being willing to try something new and being okay with it not going well. And the important thing is that you learn something from that, which piece didn't go well, and how do I change that for the next time? So you can reflect on that, and then, keep improving, which kind of circles back to that being a lifelong learner, that continuous improvement. So I think those two pieces can really help anyone be successful with implementing technology, or again, any new strategy, any tool. Just being, having that open mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I think that really helps.
Yeah, and like you said, I totally agree. Practice is one of those things. We praise our kids for it all the time. It's like praise practice. I mean, a lot of people are familiar with Carol Dweck's work in child development, and she talks about praising practice and effort as opposed to ability. And I think that goes for everybody across the board, even teachers who are starting to do this. I mean, like you have to practice at anything to get better.
Yeah, and I think that we know those things about kids, but we don't always show ourselves the same grace,
Mm-hmm.
or we don't always practice what we preach.
There is kind of like this sweeping movement for all students to have one-to-one technology in the classroom, which is super great. I know you and I both are embracers of technology, and we love it when we can get that technology and have those learning resources for our students. But there is a lot of classrooms out there that are not one-to-one, who are struggling. They maybe have like a few computers on their campus, or maybe they're lucky enough to have one or two computers or iPads in the classroom, or rotating sets or things like that. What's one tip you could give those classrooms who aren't one-to-one yet?
Well, my first thought is I'm so interested to see what that looks like after this experience with the whole distance learning, learning at home quarantine, because I think that this has really highlighted the resources that people have and don't have. And I think that we've also learned that it's not just the access to the device, but the access to connectivity and internet too. So I'm really interested to see how that changes as we come back. But going back to your original question, I think you work with what you have as best you can. And even with a small set or even one, you can start building that idea of using them to create things, working independently, digital citizenship. I think that there's a little bit of a misconception that students know how to use devices because a lot of them have personal devices at home, or maybe they access a parent or a sibling's device. But what we've learned from experience is that they really don't, because it's different. The way you use a device at home is different from the way you use a device at school. So even if you just have one or a few, you can start building that idea of what they're used for at school and how do we use them, that we use them to demonstrate our learning. And that can be in small groups instead of whole group, or that might look like working through a center or something guided with the teacher, or even working in pairs where you're creating a video and everybody has a part and you really only need one device to film or record audio, or maybe it's creating a class podcast and so everybody has parts. So I think you work with what you have, but I do think that everyone is going to move to that, and I think that's going to be accelerated by this distance learning experience. And so the important thing and the tip I would give to somebody who's not there yet is start building that mindset and those procedures of what that looks like for you, because you are going to get there. And I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later.
And that's a great piece. And that really leads into my next question with, that was, we were just talking about if you don't have one-to-one devices, what that could look like in the classroom. You did a really good job of explaining that, but you ended kind of with talking about making the movement into technology. There's a lot of people who are just now starting to dip their toe into technology and using it in their classroom. If somebody today is starting from square one with technology in their classroom, what's a piece of advice you could give them to immediately turn around and start moving forward on that?
I think with most things, the best approach is to start simply. And you don't have to jump in and try 10 different things and put your whole classroom online. And well, okay, maybe right now during a quarantine you do, but
right.
Start with one thing. So if you want to get a lot of bang for your buck, maybe you're a primary teacher, and that means you're starting with Seesaw, because you can do a lot in that one app, and that helps you, but it also helps your students, because like I talked about in that last question, maybe this is their first time using a device for learning. And so your students being able to start simply, that prepares them for success too. But don't feel like you have to do everything all at once and you've got to just jump right into the deep end and be like your neighbor who's been using their technology for a few years. Just start simply and simply start. I also think that going back to what we kind of talked about keys to success, letting that idea go that you have to be the expert, that's something else that will help with getting started. And I know what I'm about to say, something you and I have talked about a lot, is I love trying something new with the students, and you're not the expert and you you vetted a resource and you know it's safe for them. And then you can just say, hey, we are going to start using this app in our classroom to learn and to communicate and create. And I'm going to set a timer today for 5 minutes, and I want you to open it and explore. And then maybe at the end of the time, you have them share with a neighbor or a table or even the whole class what they figured out. You take that pressure off yourself. You don't have to be the expert. And honestly, you're never going to be, because there's just too much out there. So you can take that off yourself and let your students really become experts and really empower them to lead what that looks like in your classroom. And so, I think as the teachers, we have the answers, we're the experts, we're the know-it-alls. I know I was that kid. I've been that person my whole life, but in this arena, I really let that go and let my students do that. And I think that really changed the whole approach to how they learned and how I learned, when we all were able to become experts in our own little things and then share with each other. It was more of a collaborative, we're all learning together environment, which sets everyone up, to feel like they can try new things and that they have support there to catch them when it's not going well.
And I love that. That's something I stole from you personally. And, I think as teachers, we want everything to be perfect. We're always told, make really good lesson plans, pre-plan your questions, get everything thought out, have it all flushed out and ready to go. And when it comes to technology, a lot of times, just giving them the reins and say, well, we're going to learn this together. And you don't have to sit down and learn the app and make everything like perfect and set it up and guide them through every piece of the app before you get there. Let them explore, let them take over and have some ownership of that.
And I definitely learned that through experience. So, for background, I taught one-to-one for 4 years. And then this is my 3rd year as a specialist. So I'm 7 years into this journey. And that first year, I for sure tried to make first graders sit there while I mirrored my iPad and showed them how to do every little thing. And that's not a successful way to teach them how to use an app. They're not listening. They just want to touch it. They just want to do it. They're all figuring out their own thing. I'm still trying to show them how to add a text box, and 4 of them have figured out how to export it as a video already.
Right.
So, just let that go. And I learned that from them I learned that the hard way. And,
Yeah,
I think about when I taught math and science, and you would hear, okay, when the first time you use your pattern blocks, give them a few minutes to, try them out and just free play and explore and, have fun with it. Well, why not with the apps? Why not with their tools, and let them kind of figure things out and make observations on their own, and then you start using it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's perfectly reasonable. And there's also a large push in the educational community right now for a lot of project-based learning and STEM exploration and things like that. And I think this kind of goes hand in hand with that, learning through experiences and
Absolutely.
letting those experiences guide the instruction.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my last question for you is kind of a funny one. What's your favorite app? Like everybody wants to know what's the technology's expert's favorite classroom app, or actually you can give me 2. You can give me your favorite app and then give me something that somebody who's familiar with technology and expert may have not have heard before, something like off the wall.
Well, I'm glad you said I could give you 2, because I was going to give you 2 anyway. I think I've answered everything with more than you asked for.
That's okay.
But I'm just so passionate and excited about all these things. But okay, so I think that Keynote is the most underrated, underutilized app. And to quote, I think I took this from my friend Jess Garrigan, and she says it's the Swiss Army knife of the iPad. And I wholeheartedly agree, because you can create animations, you can animate line drawings, you've got the shape library, Magic Move, using Instant Alpha to create your own green screen effects. I mean, you can the world is your oyster when it comes to Keynote. So I think it's a great, you get a lot of bang for your buck, and you can do a lot. Your kids can create videos, but they can also just create slides and images, and you can go as simple or as complex as you want. And you have a ton at your fingertips, all in one app. And I really love that, because again, when we can teach our kids, give them a lot of depth with one tool, they can really get to know that tool well and do a lot with it. And I think that sets them up for success. Instead of having to learn 5 different tools and remember what each one does, they can do all of that in one. Plus, the menu is the same then if they want to transfer that across the other iWork apps. So if they want to use numbers or pages, they're going to find the same menus and the same layout. So then you can start expanding that a little bit. So Keynote
if somebody was if somebody was new to Keynote and they were like, I have no idea where to start, do you have any good resources or ideas of where they could get some information starting or suggestions on how they could start?
So I really love Twitter for learning. I think that's the best way that I learn. And you can search the hashtag everyone can create. You can search Apple EDU chat, and I'm a very visual person. And so I love to see examples, and that's where I get a lot of ideas or learn how to do new things. So I love to do that. I try to find examples and I curate them in a Wakelet that I share with teachers and PDs so they can see those examples. And I also, if you're just starting out and you have an iPad, Keynote is available on the iPad or the Mac. I think the iPad is a little bit more accessible because the interface is a little bit more simple and a little bit cleaner. So you can do the same things for the most part on both versions. But I like getting started with the iPad because it's really anything you want to add is under that plus sign, and anything you want to format is under that paintbrush. And beyond that, everything's within those 2 places. So I think that's really simple. Keynote is adding audio for little kids is amazing. Be able to add those drawings. Keynote couldn't do that yet when I was in the classroom, and I just want to go back and redo everything in Keynote.
Yeah, I can totally see that for sure.
And then, my second answer here for people that use technology, I am surprised at how many people haven't used Clips yet. And so Clips is on iOS, so iPhone or iPad, and it is the only way that I make videos now. And I used to be a big iMovie fan, and I think iMovie is great. Clips is so easy to put together really, really great, polished looking videos with effects, with music, with stickers and arrows and underlining and all kinds of things really quickly. And that's how I do all of my how-tos. If I get an email that says I need help with this, again, I think especially when you're talking about technology, people need to see. And so rather than me trying to type out this menu of steps and taking screenshots and dropping them in, I'm going to make a Clips video and send it back. That's how we've been making our videos for our Student Corner website, where we've got tutorials for students. Any of our at-home learning resources now, I'm putting everything together in Clips. So I love it for me. I think teachers could make really great videos for students, just quick things or tutorials. But then it's also great for students. Maybe they're going to go around and find examples of something, whether it's a shape or an attribute, or, different forms of energy or all kinds of things. If they can create a retelling, anything you can think of, they can create a Clips, and it's really, really fun. So I feel like it's a good one size fits all, whether you're a parent wanting to make videos of, something you did with your kids and send it out to the family, or you're a teacher, or you're a student who's going to show what they learned. I think there's something for everybody in Clips.
I'm going to ask you like a little bonus question too. Since both of the apps you talked about were in iOS, I'm going to ask you the hard question. Is there an app that you could recommend that would be available on the Android platform for those people who are Android based?
Yes, for sure. So I really like Google Jamboard. And I think that's something that a lot of people have not explored yet. And it is available as an iOS app, but it's also just a web tool. So you can access that in your browser. And it is kind of like if you had, now let's see, on the spot, I'm going to butcher this, but I feel like it's a little bit like having a whiteboard and a Padlet and a Google Doc all together in one. Mm-hmm. So I'm really liking that tool. We've used it a couple times as a reflection piece in PDs recently. So it's a collaborative tool, and students can draw, they can type, they can add images, you can upload a file, you can have different slides within it. So it's a great collaboration piece. I really like Jamboard. And I think that's kind of a newer thing that a lot of people haven't tried yet or heard of yet.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for spending some time with us. Just to sum up a couple of our key takeaways, something you said, just to recap, was that one key to success for us today was always be a lifelong learner. And the second one is letting go, kind of embracing technology, letting kids take over, and stepping outside of your comfort zone, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you. If anybody else would like to hear from Morgan Kidd, Morgan, you actually have your own podcast. It's called Making Your Mark, and you actually just published a books in iBook, right?
I did. And it's called Opening Doors to Access. And it's all about accessibility features so that students can access content and create content on their iPads.
That's amazing. And Morgan, thank you so much once again for joining us today. And I want to thank all of our listeners out there for who joined in and listened to our podcast today. My name's Brandon Handy, and I hope I helped you find your stride today. Tune in next time for another episode of Finding Your Stride. Thanks.